Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. Today I'm speaking with Sam Lines on Let's Be Civil. Sam Lines is the engineering manager at Concrete Sealants Incorporated, which is located in Trip City, Ohio. Sam earned an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering and management and later added an MBA. He has invested 30 years of his career in the precast concrete industry. Sam serves as an agent of innovation and education and is always seeking a better way. All right, welcome everybody to the next edition of Let's Be Civil, the podcast for civil engineers. And today I have a good friend, Sam Lines, who works for, and you can see behind him, Conceal. And Conceal produces a variety of products for use in the concrete industry. And one of the things that they also do, they get involved in research to not only develop new products, but to refine the ones that they have in the marketplace right now. So I'm going to let Sam give a little background about himself, and then we'll talk some about the kind of research activities they do, and then other things that Conceal's involved in. So Sam, if you can give us a little short bio to start things off, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, thanks, John. Appreciate being on here. So about myself a little bit. I've been in the concrete industry, if you will, since 1990, September 1990. So 30 years coming up this fall.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Hard to believe I've been in this industry this long. I worked for a precast concrete company for 15 years. And we produced utility vaults, septic tanks, box culverts, and things like that. As that industry started to change due to some economic problems, I was provided an opportunity to come on the other side, and that is come to the what we call in the precast industry the associate side, and that's the side where somebody sells a product to that industry. So I've been with Concrete Sealants for over 14 years now, working right now as the engineering manager. In my current role, I use the talents and skills I've used since the mid-1980s when I started working full-time. I use my technical skills in engineering and problem solving and root cause analysis. And I use those for both internal purposes and external purposes. I also have kind of championed the development of a product line called ConBlock. ConBlock is a family of products. It was sort of one of those things, it's like what we're going through now in economic challenging times, if you will. 2008 was an economic downturn for us as an economy, and I took that opportunity, if you will, and I used it to think and research and do some analysis of what could we do and come out of that better, stronger, and have a more viable product. So that's where that product line came out of. From that, then I've worked with Dr. Jason Weiss at first at Purdue University and now Oregon State to do research on ConBlock MIC and some other technologies for microbial-induced corrosion. Speaking of microbially induced corrosion of concrete or deterioration, that specifically has been like a lifelong pursuit. I've been studying that specific topic since about 1997, 1998. So very long time. So that's a real brief, real broad scope of what I've done, John.
Okay. So like we were saying that you're involved in, obviously the company's got to sell products. And which you guys have, and then you mentioned the product line, but you're working, you're constantly working on, and as you just mentioned, other things that Conceal could have in their product line. So how does that start? I mean, so you took advantage of the 2008 downturn to look into something new. But how do you kind of get started in actually coming up with a new product? Kind of walk us maybe through a little bit more of the detail of what was going through your mind at that time, and I guess it's fascinating to me because where do you start?
Yeah. I wish I could tell you that there was some formula that, okay, we just pull out the book and it's in a textbook. And one of the things I think it's important to note right now for all the students watching this is, I've gone to school. I've got a master's degree in business administration, got education in engineering and business. And you learn a lot of things in the textbook, but then you go into the we would call the real world, and you have to apply things in a different format. And education is important because it helps teach you how to solve those problems. There is no textbook formula for how to do this that I've found. It's just trial by error. And as Walt Disney once was quoted as saying, keep moving forward, keep
Right.
moving forward. So I think really what I started with, and it goes back to, I've got a certification as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. And I think the concept that comes out of that is what is of value for the customer. And we call it voice of the customer. What's the customer saying? And I think if there's one great thing that you can do to provide products to an industry is specifically to just listen to the customer. I'm not in sales. I'm not a salesman, but I do participate. I sometimes put that hat on. And I think as that type of a person, whether you're developing a product for that industry or you're selling a product to that industry, you really have to think and listen to what the customer's actually saying, because what they want sometimes isn't really what they're desiring to have. It's what they think's available now.
Right.
2 months ago, most of us didn't realize the availability of all the services and features of something like video conferencing, and now we're all becoming experts at it.
Right.
And so that's really how this started. It was looking at the customer's needs and listening to the customer. What do they want? And then trying to meet that need.
So along those lines, I want to come back to the process, but with respect to the customer need, Conceal, you in particular, and others with the company go to something called World of Concrete. I think you've been there every year for some period of time. And for those that are unaware, World of Concrete is the World of Concrete, a meeting in Las Vegas that lasts for a week. That is so large in terms of a footprint in the convention center. It's a site, it's really, and it's quite an event. And so when you're there, you have a booth, and I've come by your booth many times. That's an opportunity, I guess, for you to have those kind of conversations with individuals as they come by and talk to you. You are able to hear from them, whether they're actually existing customers or people just wanting to know more about what you offer.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like to ask people, and it's not that I'm selling them a product, I just want to talk to them. What is a problem that you're facing that you don't know that there's a solution for? That's really the question I start with. What is a problem that bothers you? What bothers you, and what would it be like if that could be solved? And it's amazing how that starts a conversation.
So as you ask that of somebody, because I understand exactly what you're saying when you mention that a customer may not actually truly understand what it is they want when they come to you the first time. I'm wondering, how does that conversation go for you, that someone will come up to, say, at the World of Concrete booth, and you ask them, what's a problem, and they give you a response back. And usually it's very specific. I mean, I find that, the response back will be, on this particular job, on this particular day, this thing happened, and I want to solve that. Do they end up leaving after talking to you, realizing that there's a bigger issue than because usually that's the case. There's a bigger issue than this one little moment in time where they had something not go as well as they would have liked it on a project.
Yeah. I think it depends on the openness of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
But for instance, we sell coatings. We sell coatings for concrete, and oddly enough, we'll have someone come up and they'll say, "Hey, I need a coating because I've got cracks that form in my concrete." As we know, there's plastic and dry shrinkage cracks that happen in the concrete world.
Yeah.
And so somebody will say, "I need a coating to cover up my cracks." And so my first question is why are you having cracks? And so it's basically to get down to the solution of, can we solve the cracks?
Right.
Oftentimes people are just looking for, can I mask this? And
Right.
So if the customer's willing, we get into a dialogue and they're thinking, wait a minute, you're a sealant company. Why are you talking to me about concrete technology and mix designs and things like that and processes inside of my operation?
Yeah.
But again, that's a unique set of skills that I can bring to Concrete Sealants that provides that value. And we can solve the problem, and then I can sell them or let our sales rep sell them a coating just to enhance, make the product even better.
Sure. So one of the things that I'm hearing from you that I think is an important takeaway from our conversation, even up to this point, is you have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to communicate well. So not only do you have to be able to hear what your customer is telling you, but you need to be able to respond to them so that they follow and understand what you're saying. So if you're going to go back to talk about some concrete technology, you have to sort of understand their level of expertise and define things and explain things to them so that they understand the technology. So communication, basically what it comes down to is communication is important.
It sure is, John.
Yeah.
Communication, if you look at any scholarly activity relating to management or leadership, communication is going to be right there at the top. It is a skill set that I think each one of us, no matter where we're at, we can get better at. But with that communication, one of the things that you have to remember too is you have to communicate to that person. You may be communicating to someone who has a PhD. You have to communicate into the level of that.
Right.
You may be communicating to someone who didn't go to college but went through the school of hard knocks, and they know a lot of jargon that you need to be able to communicate with. So you need to adjust that communication to the person you're speaking to. Yeah. And not be over their head or talk in jargon that they don't understand. Yeah. So that's one of the things. First, you really have to understand who they are and communicate in a way that they can understand what you're saying, and that you can understand what they're saying. So it sort of also requires a lot of openness on yourself to just ask open-ended questions. If you don't understand something, ask the question. And never, one of the things I say is never make statements that you don't know for a fact. If somebody asks you a question, will your product do this? If you don't know that it does or doesn't do that, don't say something just because you think it does, because if you say something like that, people will find you out, and then your trust in that customer or that opportunity will be gone.
Yeah. How and if it is different, how different is your communication internally with the individuals you work with compared to when you communicate with a customer, whenever that might be? It doesn't have to be a world of concrete, but whenever a customer is has an inquiry.
That's a very good comment. Internally, I don't think I'm any different than I am externally, But again, I have to be a chameleon with who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to the company owner, I'm going to be a little bit more professional than if I'm out talking to one of the guys in our shop making our products. I'll be a little bit more relaxed and more comfortable with them, and I want them to see that I'm just one of the guys. I'm not somebody in management or whatever the case may be. I'm just one of them. We're all players on the same team. We just have different positions.
Right, right. So do you have individuals that you supervise, or is that not part of the position that you have?
It's an interesting question. I supervised for 15 years in my previous, out of that 10 years, I guess, I was in just in design for 5 years, and then was the quality manager for 10 years. I supervised people then. Today at Concrete Sealants, I don't supervise, I have direct reports. But the interesting thing is I participate in some level of leadership, coaching, mentorship with dozens of people. Matter of fact, I would say the opportunity to do that is both vertically up and down as well as horizontal. There's people that we each use each other to make each other better, stronger, and more adaptable to what's going on. So even though in the current environment, there's less and less I guess the span of control, if you will, is a lot broader today, and the depth of control is pretty thin. We're all wearing a lot of hats, but that does not mean that you're not going to interact with people on what would be a pseudo supervisory type role, where you're going to direct somebody's work, and they may not report to you, and that's challenging, but it's just a different way we do things today.
Yeah. So let's jump back to developing a new product. So something sparks your interest in looking into something new, and the products that you have are chemicals. And so you've got to do something in a lab somewhere to put some chemicals and together and see how that works. So do you actually do the chemistry, figure out the chemistry and start, you could see the mad scientist pouring things into the beakers and whatever?
That's something I don't do. I'm from that type of science. I'm not a chemist. I got a C in chemistry in high school. Never took chemistry in college. Wanted to avoid it with all I could. Then I started studying concrete science, and I became quite a good concrete technologist. So people often mistake me as somebody who understands chemistry because I know what the concrete chemicals are and how they transform into other things. That's totally different than taking all these raw materials and making them into rubbers and coatings and liquids and making them do things. So we have a lab, we have several chemists, and that they're the ones who actually come up with the combination of things, make the product. They do that with my input. We work together. I sort of sit there and I'm telling them what the values, I'll even give them, I'll say, here's what the customer is going to be willing to pay for this. Here's the value that the customer has. So they need to have sort of a box within, what they can work in, because they might come up with something and then it's $1,000 and the customer's like, no, I'm not going to pay $1,000 for that. So we've got to make sure it's a value as a whole, not just because it solves the problem.
Sure.
So
so I would guess that you have some sort of a meeting with the chemists and you talk about, we're looking for a product that has these features that will do certain things out in the field, and it's then then you kind of look to them for these are the features, and like you said, the value. So we put some box around the cost, and then I guess you're what I'm hearing you say is you turn it over to them to sit down and think about, okay, well, what chemicals do I actually combine and in what proportions to try to achieve this objective that you've given them?
Yep. Yeah, it starts, we're an ISO 9001 certified company, so it starts with what we would call in that world a design review meeting. So we sit down and we have a discussion. Here's the features and benefits that we're looking for. So when it's all said and done, what does the big picture, what's the end result look like? And for us, that's features and benefits. So here's the features and benefits. We want to take this and make that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that? And if
Right.
they believe they can, then they go to work and they start coming up with some things. Then we'll have maybe a couple of mid design review meetings where we discuss this. So then what happens when they finally have some kind of a product available for us to test? We test that in the plant in a very controlled environment. We'll make up some concrete. We have a small concrete lab. We will test it on some products just locally here and see if it works. Especially for the admixtures that we make 2 admixtures. One of the important things is okay, we've tried it internally. If we give this to a customer, so now we want to do what's called, we did verification internally. Now we're going to do validation. We know it works in a controlled environment. Does it work in the real environment? So then we'll take the product and we'll actually do the validation, and we'll validate that if we give this product to a customer and they use it, they're going to have the same outcome that we saw in our verification process. So that's an important closing of the loop. And then we come back and we look at it and we finalize the marketing and make everything look good from that standpoint, so we can sell it at the World of Concrete.
Right, right. So what's the time frame for something like this, that you have an idea and you start to develop it to when it actually becomes available? And I realize that, a lot of it depends on the particular product, but is there, I suspect that there's a time frame in your head when you sit down and have that initial meeting that you think it will take, X number of months or whatnot to complete this project.
Yeah, and that's sort of one of the goals that's laid out at the beginning on that first meeting is, everybody talks about what is the time constraint here we're working with. Definitely different products take different cycles. For instance, in 2008, when I started working on the ConBlock family of products, one product, which was pretty easy, that product probably took 12 months in development. You have to go through some development, and we went through some laboratory testing to make sure it worked. And once we had that all done, it was pretty easy to roll out. The other product, which is an antimicrobial concrete admixture, we started that at about the same time. So probably 2008, 2009, we were testing some products. We didn't introduce that to the market until January 2012. So it took almost 3 years to bring to market. And then there's another cycle. It takes about 3 to 5 years once you get a product on the market for that to reach market acceptance, especially if it's a new technology. And so there's a definite cycle there. And I think if you're designing products, you have to understand that the payback isn't going to come for years and years later. And so there's a big investment.
What happens if you're struggling, or it looks like some product is just not going to work out? We can't figure out the chemistry, or the performance isn't what we were expecting. Something's going wrong. As you're working through the development process, what happens when that occurs?
Well, there's lots of ideas that never come to fruition. And so if a product just isn't cutting the mustard, if you will, oftentimes it just gets canned. And we have had products get canned. We have had products that are really, really good products that met the needs of the customer. We actually have one right now. It's a curing agent. You can apply it to the concrete as a curing and sealing agent. And it's great technology, but it's the Cadillac of all technologies. It's like phenomenal, but it's just exceedingly expensive. So while we came up with that, we met the customer's needs. The cost was prohibitive, even though it's better than what they're using now.
Right.
Sometimes people just don't want to buy the premium; they want to buy the basic. So
Right.
so that's one that actually sits there. It's on the shelf. Maybe someday it will come back, but so it's been, I'll say, mothballed.
Okay.
So sometimes they work, and you can't take them to market, and sometimes they just don't work, and you've got to pull the plug. And you have to. One of the things that we've looked at is, as we've gone through the 3 university studies with some products, you have to be willing to sit there and go, if we find something out that this isn't working, we've spent a lot of money,
Right.
but it's better to spend the money and then go, nope, we've got to pull the plug and take this, maybe not even bring anything to market, than it is to release something that isn't good and then take the risk of having problems coming back to you. So it's very, very important to do the front end work and get that right to begin with, and then be willing to make the tough decision.
Yep. I've got we've got a few minutes here, and so I've got two questions for you. As the development of any product resulted in some real shift, so you intended to create a product that had a certain set of features, but along the way you realized that the combination, the formulation that you were working with actually solved this other problem instead, or in addition to. Have you had any of these, like, wow, we didn't expect that kind of occurrence?
Yeah, slightly, not significant. It's a brand new product we've got, but we were asked by our industry to come up with a liquid product that would densify and waterproof concrete, just for performance features and benefits. So that was what we went through, and we wanted concrete that was a little stronger at 7 days, a lot stronger at 28 days. We wanted concrete that in wicking tests or in water penetration tests reduce the amount of water coming into the concrete. We accomplished that. We used some technologies and came up with a product. And the very first time I go to use this in a plant, I'm making concrete, and I make the comparable control cylinders, and then I make the test cylinders with the product in it. And the very first thing I notice is that the bleed water is virtually non-existent in the treated product.
Oh, okay.
And so a feature benefit that came from that product is the fact that it has an affinity for water. And so it really binds up all that excess water that's in that mix, and I'll even say holds it for later curing. But because of that, not only did it do that, bind up the bleed water, but it actually has been used and been successful at helping a plant that can't maintain a self-consolidating concrete mix, or SCC mix, because of moisture, fugitive moisture that's coming in from somewhere. If they've got a lot of variability, they can use the product to keep their concrete in better control because the affinity it has for the water. That was not something we went into design with, but it actually is a feature that the product exists, that exists in the product.
And it sounds like you didn't have any clue that, during the formulation stage, that something like this might happen. You just went to try it, and this other thing happened that you weren't expecting. So I would think that that's got to be kind of cool when you're working on going, wow, there's more here than we thought there was going to be. So
the funny thing about that is the concrete technologist guy, me, is probably more excited about that than the marketing people who went out to sell this for a specific purpose. And I'm trying to tell them, it does this.
It's this other thing,
I don't understand the benefit. And so, but yeah, that sometimes that happens, is you have a product that has other benefits.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about people coming to work for you as we wrap things up here today. How does a student, if they were interested, or even somebody that's already graduated and has a position somewhere and they're looking for a change. How do you guys go about hiring and recruiting individuals?
Okay, well, it's not something that I'm directly involved with, but this year we're going to do something for the first time. The NPCA, the National Precast Concrete Association, has a foundation that gives scholarships to students to participate in learning about precast while they're getting a degree in something like civil engineering. And I'm actually on the board of the foundation right now. We as a company have the opportunity this summer, to bring an intern in to maintain a scholarship with the NPCA Foundation. That scholarship recipient has to accumulate so many work hours in the precast industry. So the idea is that they would intern the summer after their freshman, sophomore, and junior years to maintain that scholarship.
Right.
So we actually are bringing in our first intern this summer. And so the opportunity presented itself. They're a civil engineering student. They're going to come to work for a sealant company. And it was an interesting conversation. I sat down with the person and said, if you want to build bridges, you're not going to build bridges here. You're not going to design bridges.
Right.
But what we do is we work with people who are building box culverts and underground construction and bridges and all sorts of other things all over the country, really all over the world. So you're going to get an exposure to all of that globally versus just one project specifically.
Right.
So that was an interesting opportunity for us. Also, one of the things that we do is we do locally, we provide opportunities for summer employment for college students. We'll have about sometimes 6, sometimes 8 or 10 students come. They're in college or they're getting ready to go to college. We occasionally then have people who we see skill sets that are good for us, and we've actually retained some students who have come here to work during college, and then they've stayed here to work as an employee.
Oh, nice.
And then third, we're a company just like everybody else. We've got an aging workforce who in 5 or 10 years, we're going to be retired or very close to retiring.
Right.
We're in the process now of basically building that next generation of workers. So the chemists, the engineers, and those positions, we're starting to fill them with young, some college graduates, some young career individuals.
Well, Sam, we're up against the time for our podcasts. So I really appreciate you joining me today on Let's Be Civil. I look forward to having another conversation with you, and maybe we get into something a little bit more technical and talk about one of your product lines and learn something specific, that's a little bit more engineering perspective. But this is good information for individuals as they're looking at careers and possible education in the civil engineering or construction field. So I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, John. Have a good day.
Yep, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.